My name is Pablo Mariano. I'm a researcher at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. This is joint work with Robert Bridges and Michael Iannacone. Today, I'm going to get you excited about the use of unsupervised machine learning to help on the detection of Masquerade attacks in the CAN bus. Before getting into the details of our study, let me start by revisiting some of the most common types of attacks that can be performed in CAN. Based on existing literature, a common framework to group CAN attacks is based on this three-tier taxonomy. First, fabrication attacks require an adversary to inject extra frames. They have been widely deployed, in particular through denial of service and fuzzing. Second, suspension attacks require an adversary to silence ECUs by removing benign frames. And third, masquerade attacks requires an adversary to send frames in lieu of, and therefore at the expected time of, benign frames, but with malicious payloads. In masquerade attacks, adversaries first suspend frames without a specific ID, and then inject spoof frames that modify the content of the frames instead of their timing patterns. In this work, we focus on detecting masquerade attacks. In particular, this figure illustrates the scenario in a masquerade attack. In fact, in order to attack and remotely stop a Jeep Cherokee running on a highway, Miller and Balasek had to control its ABS collision prevention system by mounting a masquerade attack. In particular, this figure, the attack progresses as the adversary learns the frequency of frames sent by ECU B. Once it learns the frequency of frames B0 at time t, the adversary suppresses the transmission of messages by ECU B and utilizes a strong compromise ECU to inject messages from ECU A with forget content. Key in masquerade attacks is that the adversary sends messages at the same frequency of benign ECUs, but with malicious content. Therefore, masquerade attacks are the stealthiest CAN attacks. To detect previous mentioned attacks, different methods have been proposed in the literature. For masquerade attacks, successful attacks rely mainly on analyzing the content of CAN frames using two different approaches. First, payload, in which the focus is on analyzing the raw bit string of the frames, and second, signal-based, in which the focus is on analyzing the translate version of those contents of those frames. However, current work has some limitations. On the one hand, payload-based methods, given that the raw string of bits is used, there is a semantic gap in the analyzed signals, which is necessary to detect subtle masquerade attacks. On the other hand, most of the signal-based methods focus on expensive deep learning machinery, such as autoencoders and sequential models, requiring expensive data sets and training. In addition, experiments performed with this type of methods have focused on using synthetic data sets with dozens of signals at most. Our contribution is then threefold. First, we introduce and detail an unsupervised machine learning CAN forensic framework, which is based on time series clustering using agglomerative hierarchical clustering, or AHC. Second, clustering similarity and hypothesis testing. We also perform sensitivity analysis on the effects of the linkage function in the AHC on the detection results. We test common linkage options, including single, complete, average, and warp. Finally, we test the proposed framework on real attacks from the raw dataset. The raw dataset is an open set of CAN data collected from a real vehicle with masquerade attacks. But more importantly, all of these attacks were physically verified, in which the effect of this CAN manipulation was observed and documented in the vehicle. The raw dataset consists of 12 ambient captures totaling about 3 hours of training data and 33 attack captures totaling about 30 minutes of data. The basis of our work is on clustering time series through hierarchical clustering, which is a method that outputs a hierarchy of clusters or a set of nested clusters that are organized in a tree-like diagram known as a dendrogram. It works by transforming a proximity matrix into a sequence of nested partitions. Hierarchical clustering using the agglomerative approach places each object in its own cluster and gradually merge these atomic clusters into larger ones until all objects belong to a single cluster. This figure depicts the details of the hierarchical clustering. In particular, figure from the left is showing a set of 4 time series to be clustered. They are grouped into a hierarchical cluster by color: aquamarine, orange, and purple. The thickness of the cluster represents how the hierarchy is built: close time series aquamarine, more distance time series orange, and more distance time series in purple. The corresponding dendrogram of the hierarchical cluster is depicted in the middle figure, figure B. Time series are placed in the x-axis, and the relative distance is shown in the y-axis. And finally, the right from the plot is showing different clusters as it levels or the hierarchy written explicitly. Given two hierarchical clusters or dendrograms of a set S, a clustering similarity quantifies a distance between them. We compute the similarity between dendrograms using the open source clustering method, which is basically a framework to quantify the similarity value produced by the closeness of these dendrograms in the range 0 to 1, where 0 implies maxima dissimilar clusters and 1 corresponds to identical clusterings. Once each dendrogram has been computed for each file, we compute empirical distributions of similarity between pairs of dendrograms. We focus on two distinct groups. The first group is composed of all dendrograms derived from the files in benign conditions, 12 files. In doing so, we compute pairwise similarities of dendrograms in this group that is possible in these combinations. The second group comes from the similarity between dendrograms in each attack category and each of the files in the benign conditions. They produce a varying number of combinations based on the number of files in each of these attack categories. We use them and unintended lieu test and test the significant level to 5% to test the null hypothesis that the distribution underlying benign conditions is the same as the distribution underlying attack conditions. The unintended lieu test is a non-parametric test used as a test of difference between locations of probability distributions. Here we summarize our main results. In particular, we found that the discriminatory power of our framework depends on, one, the linkage function being used. So we found that for the war linkage, it details all of the attacks, so 5 of 5, and it's followed by a complete linkage, 4 of 5, and both single and average linkage method detect fewer attacks, 3 of 5. Also, we found that the discriminatory powers depends on the severity of the attack, and that means that the attacks affecting fewer correlated signals are harder to detect. So for example, in the case of the reverse light-on attack, where only one bit signal is targeted, was the most difficult to defeat by our framework. We also compute and compare the performance of the proposed framework for classifying benign and attack files. For that reason, we use cross-validation by letting 3 benign files apart. We found that for correlated max speedometer and reverse lights of attacks, the recall is about 100% and precision 88%. The lower results were found for the max engine coolant attack for the reasons we explained before. Finally, to summarize, we effectively show that our proposed framework is effectively detecting masquerade attacks. Our framework relies on time series clustering using agglomerative hierarchical clustering, computes the dendrogram similarity, and then runs a hypothesis test. The discriminatory power of our framework depends on the linkage function to be used and the impact of the attacks in the correlated signals. Future work includes the development of a real-time IDS that uses the principles in this work. With this, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.